Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
And as we continue to move on, I want to welcome program author Cammie McGovern. Cammie, thanks for calling. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm great.
So
Loving
tell
the book
me,
fair.
absolutely, why did you become a YA novelist?
I actually write YA and middle grade, but I started out writing for adults, and I'm one of those that once you have kids and you start to realize how fabulous children's books are these days. It's a really exciting world to get into, and I was delighted to make the transition and probably won't go back. I think it's just rich with all kinds of possibilities. I love it.
So you were doing a lot of writing before starting with YA and children.
Yes, I was an MFA at Michigan and a Stegner at Stanford, and then I just made this switch over. So I was kind of the literary novelist and made this switch over to YA and middle grade about, I would say, 5 years ago.
Okay. Peter, question for her.
Gotcha. So what is the thing you love most about writing?
So many things, because I've been doing it for 25 years. What I love about writing for kids, maybe what started me was that I'm the parent of a 20-year-old with autism, and I started a while ago when I was feeling like there was a real paucity of any books out there that had central characters of kids with disabilities where that wasn't the main issue, that was just the part of who they were and their life. And I wanted to get that out there. I wanted to just tell stories about these kids. There's so many of them out there, and they've got very full lives and very desires and dreams that are very similar to their typically developing peers, and I wanted to tell those stories, I guess. Does that answer your
Great.
question?
I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
Tell us about your most recent work. What did you just publish, or what's coming out in the near future?
I just published last spring a middle grade called Just My Luck that is told from the younger brother of a kid who has pretty severe autism, and that's the closest to my own family, and it's hopefully a story about resilience and about what these families, kind of what these kids with disabilities have taught their families, which is that these things that might look like a tragedy at first, like an autism diagnosis, really isn't. And being different isn't a tragedy.
Yes.
And and then not having the same skill set as your peers also isn't a tragedy. It's simply different. It's something that kids with disabilities teach their parents and their families, really. And it's kind of about that. It's the younger son has to cope with a bunch of problems. And then my next book is told from the point of view of a dog who has failed out of service dog school and goes to live with a family that has an autistic kid. And he's still
Oh, my gosh.
look.
Yeah.
Anybody who has a dog.
Oh, that's great. But, Cammie, you have two major interesting parts of what you're doing in this niche now. Not just YA, but in the way with autism, this book and the next book coming up.
Yeah.
Because here's the reason why. It's misunderstood. It's diagnosed more than it's ever, which is great.
Yep.
But ultimately, there's a lot of leeway in this diagnosis, and that makes me nervous. Because, before we had a variety of different places to put children with autism and adults with autism. Now it's just one big area. So I'm happy that you are getting it out there in books so that other kids can be accepting, but also the parents can feel like I'm not alone, and I can read this book. And that's, this is something that makes them very nervous, and it's close to home with many people, Cammie.
Yes, that is one thing you learn pretty quickly. It's a huge community out there, with a wide variety of kids with a huge spectrum of abilities and passions and all of that. And I wanted to tell the stories where the joy comes back in their lives and the pleasure, because that's what happens with most of these kids, is that once you get over those early hard years, you start to have a pretty full life, and the family has a full life again. And I didn't know that for a long time. For a long time, I was in the bleakest and worst feeling as if our family was never going to be normal. We were always going to be kind of living this dark little less than everybody else. And it hasn't been that way. And those are the stories I wanted to tell, the joyful other end stories.
Gotcha. Yeah, probably Neil has probably known about this. I'm just itching to say a couple of things because of my own disability. I have blindness, but I have extreme low vision. But for the longest time, and I've been progressively losing my vision over the course of 5 years, from being vision impairment to totally blind. But despite that, I have been doing art. I have been doing what people have told me for years and years and years. There's no way you're going to be able to do art as, either as a recreation or as a profession. And here I am today doing art. I'm doing social media despite my blindness. And it just, and I enjoy it and I thoroughly just have fun with it. And I think it's an awesome thing because also I'm in the autistic spectrum too, because I have a couple of people who are autism activists here in Minnesota. So it would be awesome if we could connect, but it just sounds like a really awesome book and really awesome what you're doing.
Oh, good. Also what you're doing, which is just talking about yourself and what it opens possibilities. I think that the more we tell these stories, you telling your story and me telling just typical, these kids that look very different. My YA books have a kid with cerebral palsy and one with a version of Down syndrome. And both of them are love stories. But the more that kids see the similarities and possibilities that, yes, their love relationships are possible. Yes, there is sexuality. Yes, there is artistic achievement, career achievement after. Yeah, all of these things. You just can wrap your minds around it, and it's less mysterious, less they exist less in an other world and re-enter our world, I think. Oh, wonderful that you're doing this and on the radio and talking about it. That's great.
Yeah, well, the big thing that I find is that people fear what they don't know. And from my personal perspective of working with other people, if I can get this to people and start the conversation, it ceases to be something that they fear and that they find is different, because then they start realizing, there's an actual person, there's actual, an actual life, there's talents, there's all sorts of different things despite what they might have. And I find that to be an absolute fantastic thing, and that's one of my missions on my own network and on my own social media. So thank you for being a part of today's interview.
Wonderful. Oh, maybe we can connect up after this is over. I do think there's something, at least when my son was first diagnosed, where there was a kind of feeling that it was more polite not to ask questions, not to talk for teachers, not to talk about the disabled kids in their class. I think most of my books are set in schools where these kids are included, fully included, yet there's still a kind of invisible wall between peers, especially after elementary school. And that's what I wanted to get at, was that sort of wall that's created by having an aide that is sitting in the back of a class. One of my YA books has a very high-functioning girl with CP who's nonverbal, and so she's never made a friend because they're all mystified by her and never have wanted to ask her questions that would require a computer to respond. And there's a ton of kids like that, actually. And once you start doing and they're fascinating and, great to connect with some. I just wanted to kind of lower those and sort of say, let's all start talking about some of these differences and not be scared of them.
Great. Well, I could talk to you forever, but I want to give them the opportunity.
That's a great point, Cammie. And both of your points. I'm an educational advocate. I work with lots of children with autism in my tutoring consulting company, and I just really
fabulous.
And I also have I coach a Asperger's college student at Marshall University, and coaching and consulting. The thing I think that we need to really run into in this situation is developing the ability to not look at their disability, but look at their abilities.
Yep.
And really give them the opportunities that they need. And I think, and my concern, Cammie, and I'm sure as an advocate as yourself, is that if we limit their possibilities, it's going to be awful.
Yep.
And what are you thinking in that end, especially with your son, and especially why we're making it just one diagnosis? I'm just nervous.
That's an interesting question, and I wish I had a really good, smart. You mean like that the autism is getting too broad and including too many?
Yes.
Yeah, you've got a good point there. I have felt like one plus to that is that it's such a broad tent. People aren't scared to get their kid underneath it, as I was 18 years ago when my son was, 17 years ago when I thought he would be labeled, and it would be, it was pathetically short-sighted of me, and I wanted to avoid that label for a long time when he desperately needed it, and it was by far the appropriate label. And now I feel like everybody's happy. The word is out. Get your early intervention as quickly as possible. Don't be scared of these labels. But it could be down the line. And in fact, everybody's trotting over to get their autism diagnosis.
Yeah, and I just think
we're
doing it so early, and we're putting them all in the same area.
Yeah.
And I just believe,
you're right.
with the disability, if you have Asperger's, and you have a really good shot of being really successful as an adult, even autism, as you look at Temple Grandin. But if we put them all under one area, we cannot individualize education with adults and children with autism. And I'm frustrated by this, and I hope that newer people start talking about this more and how our government moves forward with this. And that's my opinion, and I hope that they bring this conversation up.
You are right. You're right. You've got a really good point, because it's true that somebody with high-functioning Asperger's doesn't want to sit in the same room for all that long with the STEMI, lower-functioning autistic kids, and they don't see much in common, and it's off-putting for them. That's really true. Yeah. All
right. Well, Cammie, best place we can purchase your book and learn more about you. I'm sure Peter will be reaching out to you for sure, and connections, and I definitely am happy I got the chance to chat with you, but where can we find info on you, please?
My website, CammieMcGovern.com, and there we go. And I'm happy if anybody is doing I love doing Skype visits with classrooms that have SPED kids in them. I do a lot of that, and I love that.
Great.
So if anybody out there is that kind of teacher that's running a book club that focuses on that, or any kind of book club, get in touch.
All right, Cammie. Thanks for calling.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Oh, what a great effort you guys are doing with this show all day long. Not easy, but fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, take care. You're welcome. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
You're listening to Authors Corner, powered by Life Improvement Radio, live from the Miami Book Fair, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.